Hi. Thanks for tuning in to my official YouTube channel, Reverend MeeLing. I'm Reverend MeeLing, though I've been known by a few other names, such as Reverend Susan MeeLing, Susan MeeLing, Lady MeeLing, and Lady Dori, Belle. A few other names, depending where I knew you. So, I'm going to just pick a story that I wrote about and just kind of irony, I found something in reference to a fairy. In reference to scuba diving. Irony. So, I guess in a more up-close sort of aspect, in comparison to the drawn-out aspect. So, I had done a lot of training personally for my scuba diving. I found an article online. It was from a medical journal in reference to scuba diving. And it had said, it was a Jewish medical journal that had discussed the medical benefits in reference to people who deal with headaches. And after I had read the Jewish medical journal, I researched a little bit more, and I contacted the PhDs and MDs who were listed in that article. And I had, asked in reference to my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, what the thought process was for those guys in that reference. And I think I did bring up the fact that I understood that not being part of a traditional scientific study in that regard was not something that they could technically recommend one way or another, though I wanted their opinions in that regard to see whether or not, pun intended because of the ocean, what their recommendations might be. I didn't receive any responses back. However, I did research a bunch more in reference to the different aspects. So I read some British scientific journals after the Jewish scientific journal or medical journal, and I had made sure that I read everything that I could in that regard as best as I could research before actually getting involved with scuba diving. And despite what I had remembered from before my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, I had never gone scuba diving. So I just went swimming in the ocean in the Atlantic area off of the New Jersey coastline. And I would swim out, past the jetties as a child and try to, see what the scuba divers were doing. I didn't know that's what they were called as a child back then. So after probably about a month, maybe 2 months of just trying to find more information in that regard, I had essentially exhausted all resources in reference to the internet, looking up stuff. And so I went to one scuba diving location, and they didn't seem to have what I was looking for. And I'm not saying anything bad about that. It's just the scuba school just wasn't what I was looking for as far as the amount of education that I knew I needed to get and to prepare myself. And so I found International Scuba in Carrollton, and I went in and I spoke with the owner, Patty, ironically, her name is PATTI. However, it is a PADI, or Professional Association of Diving Instructors registered school. I'm sure that they have other stuff that they work with nonetheless. Patty, as in PATTI, had told me not only was there the different levels for open water scuba certification, there were also additional classes she had available through PADI, and so, or Professional Association of Diving Instructors. And one of the things that were offered were a 16 scuba dive certification course that you could take up to a year to complete all of the certifications. And it's like, that is mandatory for me. And so, because of what I had read in reference to the benefits for headaches, and knowing some of the aspects in regards to the after effects from the head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, this was 2009 that I started going and speaking with the school. Before actually going and getting involved, I did quite a bit of research. Went and filled out the form to make sure that everything was okay, as long as, according to the paperwork, as long as I had not had the head injury within the past 5 years, I was considered clear to go. Okay, well, the head injury happened in 2000. It was 2009. I was clear to go in that regard. It had asked about surgeries. Well, I did have a surgery the year before, or two, well, technically 3. So I went to the doctor who had done the most invasive surgery by technicalities, surgeries, and he looked over the form and said, yep, you're clear to go. You've healed up much quicker. I actually healed up much quicker than he thought I would. And so, got that form taken care of, handed it in, and I went and registered for the class, got the required gear that was necessary, and I chose the National Geographic open water scuba diving course through PADI, or Professional Association of Diving Instructors. And because of very much comprehending the aspects, not just of the headaches and migraines, but also the fact of the issues within the reference of the memory deficits, the cognitive disorders, and having gone from college algebra with trigonometry and calculus to 2nd grade math, I knew I needed to do extra for myself. And so, and not just for myself, but anybody I went scuba diving with. And not just for them as well. I mean, I wanted to make sure that no matter what scuba dive I went on, I would be able to return to my children no matter what. And being a single mom, that definitely put things to another level. And so it was a multifaceted aspect in reference to all the different reasons why I was so adamant about my own education for scuba diving. So when going through the open water National Geographic scuba certification, I knew I needed to have a certain, even though it wasn't based off of a GPA sort of thing, I had set standards for myself as far as what I considered acceptable for myself. And so, really quickly pausing there and going pre-head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000, I had always been really adept to water. And so when I was a child at my babysitter's house, I had made a whirlpool in her actual pool. It was an above ground pool. I think it was like 5 feet deep. And by myself, I made a whirlpool. And then I wanted to see if I could get the water to go faster, if there were more individuals involved. So we all swam really fast. The guys wound up getting out. I just kept going. I was like, this is fun. So, and that was technically before going into the ocean to swim out as far as I had. During camp, when my biological parents weren't paying attention, going out to the buoys and getting on top of, depending on which area, there were the ones that had the buckets and the kind of, it's not a cone per se, it's kind of like it's like a cylinder kind of shape with a little circle thing on top. And, swim out to there, get into that, and climb on top of that, and then dive off. Or the other buoys, which are a circular shape, and just kind of grab onto it and then go spin with it, because why not? I was a child, so, very easily entertained. Irony in various regards as to now. And then, going out to the netting, swimming on, getting to the point where standing on top of the netting to dive off, and then going, and irony of, it being the coast of New Jersey, I went swimming with the fishes. However, I came back. So, in camp, I had done certain things because in order to be able to go into the deep end, you had to accomplish certain things. And one of them was treading water for 3 minutes. And because I got bored, I figured, well, let me figure different ways that would make the 3 minutes go by sooner. So, and I'd gone to the camp a total of 3 different times. So one session, I put my arms behind my back and crossed them, and then just tried to keep kicking. But then, after the first minute, I was like, well, let me try if I have my legs kind of together and wrapped around, but keep myself above water. And so it was just varying ways in those 3 different summer camps that I had just, well, I'm bored. Treading water is not really that difficult when you know how to do the butterfly and the scissor when it comes to swimming. I mean, not to sound arrogant. It's just, treading water for 3 minutes, knowing how to do the butterfly in and remain in the lane for swimming. And again, having swam in the ocean compared to a lake, kind of boring. How do I make it more fun-ish? And that was my thoughts. I was like, well, I could do this, or keep my hands this way and just kind of swim however I do to tread water or whatever, stay in the same spot. It is what it is. And so when in reference to my actual first certification, I had made sure to get all the information as best as I could. I took notes as far as the books were concerned. My main problem was the math, the numbers. That was my issue, which I wasn't surprised by that at all. My scuba instructors probably were by a lot, especially in reference to the fact that I had understood and comprehended the vast majority of the information. It was simply the numbers that was my problem. And so the diving instructors actually had to have extra time with me in reference to that, because I couldn't do the math in my head. I could only count up to 10. The Navy only taught me how to count to 10. And that didn't include adding or subtracting. That was just counting to 10 when I was at Fort Sam Houston after waking up from a coma. And the Army orderly room was like, oh, go to the Navy. Okay. So in that regard, I had studied extremely diligently, and I saw it as a multifaceted aspect. The first aspect of course, being able to descend and ascend safely no matter what. But also, my son and my daughter would see me taking scuba diving extremely seriously, but not just that, the aspects of also the studies and making sure I understood things. And so they would see me study while they did play in the backyard and stuff like that. We would talk about things, so on and so forth. So they knew that, when I had told them that I wanted them to have a good education, that it wasn't just me saying it, they actually saw me going and doing it as well. And so they were able to see that I wasn't hypocritical in that regard. But I also explained it as to, I need to make sure that no matter what in this regard. So when it came to my actual open water National Geographic certification, my particular class had gone out to Aquarina Hot Springs, and my children saw me all dressed up in my scuba gear, and my daughter said, "Oh, you look like an astronaut." No. Scuba diving gear. Scuba divers go down. Astronauts go up. There's a big difference in regards to the direction. And so I do actually have, and it does, it's me and my scuba diving gear holding my white fins and yes, there's the words over my face, but you can obviously see my hair. And so, had my scuba gear and stuff like that. And my daughter, like, "Oh, you look like an astronaut." No, honey. I look like a scuba diver in there because I've got scuba diving gear. I'm just saying. Big difference. Again, space is up. Scuba diving go down. That's how that goes. And so despite what happened in 2011, that's a whole other ball of wax. And so, they watched what they could in reference to the class aspect at the lake, or the Aquarina Hot Springs. But they did go to the lake a few times and get to see me do some stuff. Not very often, but they did. And so, they got to understand and see that stuff. I got them into swimming classes at International Scuba. And so, they weren't afraid of the water. And they were able to have that education in certain regards. And so, I had signed up for that 16-course scuba certification, which did not include the National Geographic Open Water certification. That was a separate 16 certifications. And while I was at it, I was like, well, let me add that and that and that and that and that and that and that, because those all seemed like they'd be extremely important for me. And at one point in time, I was asked, well, when are you going to go in the ocean? When I feel comfortable. It's not that I don't feel comfortable in the ocean swimming. Scuba diving, you got all that gear, you're going to be under the water. Like, I have this thing where I want to complete at least 70, at that time it was a minimum of 70 scuba dives before I would consider the ocean dives. And so from basically March 1st of 2009 is when I graduated, although there was technically the day before that I had my scuba diving class, so those dives did count in that 70 number. So by the time I had signed up in May to get my drift and ocean certification, which was a part of that 16-course certification, I had the 73 scuba dives before booking that trip. And I had completed the majority of my courses. Realistically, June of 2009 was when I completed the 25 out of 26 scuba certifications. So from technically the end of February of 2009 to June of 2009, I earned on my own 25 scuba certifications. The last scuba certification I had earned, cavern scuba diving, had been the class and the work was in the middle of September or the beginning of October, one or the other. I made sure to be there for my son and my daughter's birthdays and be able to do that sort of stuff. And then my final was in November of 2009. So my first ocean dive was at Cozumel, leaving from the other side of the island, closer towards the Gulf of Mexico portion of the ocean. And so landed at the bottom there. It was 108 ATMs, or atmospheric measurements. I know it's atmospheric measurements because my scuba dive gear was, I purchased it from International Scuba from the person who worked there, Anthony, and he had informed me that it was a UK or United Kingdom scuba dive 3-in-1, depth gauge, tank monitor, as well as navigation. And the only thing wrong with it was there was one scratch on the back because of a dive that the previous guy had an issue with. And so got a really good deal on it, realistically. And so when dropping down in Cozumel, it's 108 ATMs. So for those who don't know atmospheric measurements, it's 108 times 33 feet. And that is how deep I was. The scuba divers who were with me, they were, a few feet above me, but, I touched the bottom because I am me. I didn't kick up any silt. However, I am me. So, as a real quick reference point, this is actually from the scuba dive in Cozumel. So the zoom was barely used. If anything, it would have been a 4 digital zoom, maybe 5. And so that's how close to, and that was after I had touched my fin to the floor of the ocean area right there. So, and did that in several locations. There was a point, it was the night dive. That was a daytime dive, by the way. There was a night dive that was at 110 ATMs. So 110 times 33 feet, and that's how many. How deep. And so while the other scuba divers maintain their buoyancy, like I did maintain my buoyancy. There's no denying that. However, because I have the childish mindset that I do, I'm going to touch my fin to the bottom of the foot, put my whole foot down. I did it. And so, I know, a little ornery, I get it. And so, and did that for each dive. So the first day of scuba diving after we had arrived, that was just a shoreline dive around a certain area. And then, and while the other 2 scuba divers stayed a few levels, I am the way I am. I see you guys. But I'm going to go a little lower just because I can. And I'm going to be safe, but I can do it. And so I did. And then, the following day was a daytime scuba dive. Following day after that was a nighttime scuba dive. And then the last day was just before flying out. And so we had a day around the island. And then, whatchamacallit, did some more scuba diving when in Texas again. And then went to Florida. I took my son, my daughter, and my niece to Georgia first to see my ex-sister-in-law in Georgia and her husband and the other ones there. And then went to Florida. I was supposed to be able to scuba dive with the whale sharks in the Georgetown Aquarium. However, the night before we were going to go, I caught my ex-sister-in-law, Mary Evangelina Nichols Osteen, in my scuba dive gear bag. And she had said, oh, no, you can't do that tomorrow. And so, why not? Well, because, your children don't need to see you doing that. They've seen me in my scuba dive gear. I mean, just saying. They've seen me in my scuba dive gear. They know that I scuba dive. I'm not afraid of that. And so, obviously I didn't realize certain things until later. However, I've already sent those books off, so there is that. So after the Florida trip, or during the Florida trip, I should say, after Georgia, went to Boca Raton, which is where the resort was that we stayed at. And after the first couple of days of the different things that I had planned for my son, my daughter, and my niece to be able to do, partially irony of going to NASA in Cape Canaveral. Apparently that's also called the Kennedy Center, which is ironic. Weird little coinky dink, nonetheless. One of the days I had gone out early, and my son, my daughter, and my niece, they were going to, and they slept, and they were still asleep by the time I showed up. So I was like, that's cool. That works out perfectly. You guys get up, we're going to go do stuff after I got back from my ocean dive over there. So in the Atlantic Ocean, I had gone out on the boat. It was a speedboat. I was assigned to a scuba diver who also did underwater photography, where I just did, recreational aspect at that point. He did professional scuba dive underwater photography. And so we dropped down and we had 2 dives, and the speedboat went out about an hour or so. And then we dropped down and had a good dive. Of course, because I'm me, I'm going to touch because I can. And that one was about 111 atmospheric measurements. So for both dives. The second dive was less than that, but nonetheless, still. First dive was 111 ATMs. Atmospheric measurements. So 111 times 33 feet. And that's how deep we were. At least, no, because I hadn't touched the bottom of the ocean. Just because I could. And so, then the rest of the scuba dive trip for that day, that guy and I talked during the surface interval, as well as the boat ride out, as well as the boat ride back. And really, really awesome guy to speak with. A lot of experience. And so then, when later in the week I took my son, my daughter, and my niece to the Florida Keys, so that way we could do the dolphin excursion and all that. Did a little bit of free diving because I wanted to get closer to the manta rays that were down there to get some pictures, which I did. Upset that I didn't have my scuba dive gear, because I would have been, but nonetheless. However, during the scuba dive from Boca Raton, that guy, during our surface, before the surface interval, had noticed that there was air coming out of the back of my BCD. And I obviously I didn't notice it because it was in the back. And when taking it off, there was a slash in the back of my BCD. And as a prepared diver, I had more than one BCD. So there's that. Not forgetting I didn't put my regulator in the same bag. Not that hypothetically, if it's a coinky dink in regards to Mary Evangelina Nichols Osteen, hypothetically, I don't want to, make any false accusations. So hypothetically speaking, since that, hypothetically, if she had put the slash in the BCD, she only did it in one and not both that I know of. Nonetheless, obviously I surfaced because today is the 4th of June 2020. That was back in August of 2009. So as far as the scuba diving. And so I had taken my son, my daughter, and my niece on the dolphin excursion. And then that whole thing with the storm coming in, I was like, yeah, no, you need to, no. And so we got back to shore. And then the following day is when I went out to the Vandenberg scuba dive. And I had been partnered with an individual for scuba diving that had 10 years of scuba experience, and then scoffed at me for only having 2 ocean dives and having done the rest of my prior dives of over 73, because I stopped counting at that point, for the first ocean dive in that regard. Now, in reference to the Cozumel dive, one of the males on that scuba diving trip, we had discussed certain things about scuba diving. And I had told him that I was going to go to the Vandenberg. And I had told him that I was trained in wreck diving because I got my certification. And I don't think he really understood that I actually meant going into the Vandenberg. I think he did, but he didn't want to believe in that regard. And he was like, yeah, okay, you're going to go do that. Yeah, uh-huh. No, I am. I'm going to do that. Like, I don't think you understand. Like, my plan is to drop down and then go in to the Vandenberg. And, I'll have my line. I have a 500-foot line. I've got my cookies. I got this. I got that. I got extra flashlights. Not forgetting all of my scuba knives. Not just the ones that were attached to my BCD, but my extra ones. And he was like, do you really need all that? Yes. Yes, I do. The amount of knives that I was extremely, and still am, proficient in using. When scuba diving, ironically, I could make a joke that, since I'm in the state of Texas, there could be some guys who are into the Second Amendment. How did you do what? How many knives did you have? And you could do that with, concealed handguns and Second Amendment. And, but instead, scuba knife, and scuba knives. And anyway, I had a few knives. A lot. And in every pocket of my BCD, as well as outside of my BCD, had scuba knives. And that doesn't forget the ones that I strapped to my legs as well as my arms when for scuba dives. And I did practice that way in the lakes and the quarries in the state of Texas because I wanted to make sure that I knew what I was doing with my gear and prepared at any situation. And so, I did practice underwater as well, as far as with my knives, because I needed to make sure that if I absolutely had to use any one of my knives, no matter what, I'd be quick enough. Because obviously those who have gone swimming or scuba diving in water, there is that resistance. So, got to make sure I can do that, no problem. So it was just that simple. And for me, at least, I can't be the only one. Nonetheless, well, in that regard of training in reference to scuba diving, despite the differences in overall ways. Nonetheless, so for the Vandenberg dive, I had spoken with even the guy in reference to Boca Raton. I told him, yeah, I'm going to go drop down. I'm going to go in. And he's like, you're going to go do what? Yeah, no, I'm dropping down. And I got my wreck stuff. And I even showed him on that boat. And the guys that were on that particular dive, they're looking at me and they're like, you're going to do what? Yeah, no, I'm going to do a wreck dive over at the Vandenberg. I'm going to drop down. I'm going to go in. And they're like, inside the Vandenberg. Yeah. What wreck diving is, yeah, you that's what you think you're going to do. I know that's what I'm going to do. That's what my dive plan is I'm going to drop down, and I'm going to find an entrance, and I'm going to go in unless I'm told otherwise. And if I'm told otherwise, I'm still dropping down. And they were just, well, sure you are. And so then, went at the Vandenberg and speaking with the dive buddy that I was assigned because I had a nitrox tank and so did he, started doing I had asked him, well, what do you have in mind for a dive plan? And then he asked me what a dive plan was, and that should have been a big old red flag. Obviously I didn't. That probably is cognitive stuff right there. Nonetheless, so I explained to him what a dive plan was as the dive master was going back and forth in the area of the ship, the Starfish Enterprise, and the guy said, well, what is your dive plan? Because he'd already been the way he was in reference to the diving experience I had. I said, oh, well, I got this, and do the wreck dive. We can attach this here because according to this map, we can tie it here, 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 or here because it shows this, and da-da-da. And that would be when the dive master, quickly walked to the front or the stern of the ship. Hello, everybody. Yeah, pay attention. This is the Vandenberg is a safe sex dive. You do not penetrate the Vandenberg. You can just swim above it. This is to everybody. And then looking directly where I was. But, no going inside the Vandenberg. You can, swim above it. And it's for everybody. Yeah, but hi. Yes. So, I have my rec certification. So, and I got my reel. I got my 500-foot reel. And I got my cookies. So, I can go in. No, nobody. This is for everybody. Everyone. And yes, and they already knew about my head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000 because when checking in, there was like a half-hour, 45-minute time frame where we got to speak with people before actually getting onto the boat. So we were all talking, and the dive master was like, so you had a head injury? You went, yeah, I had a head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. Told them the whole thing. Oh, okay. So then afterwards, yeah. So, I'm trained. I've been planning this. Like, I planned this whole thing for several months now. No. Yes. No. Yeah. I planned it. Planned my dive. Trained. Good day. So this is for everyone. Do not. Why do you keep looking at me? Apparently because I was the only person who was talking about going inside of the Vandenberg, because probably everybody else on that ship, with the exception of my dive buddy, ironically, probably had an idea of how big the Vandenberg was and or the depth level of the Vandenberg. So, get to the Vandenberg area, and I look over the side of the ship. I'm like, look, there it Vegas. Las Vegas right there. And my scuba dive buddy looks over and he goes, where? Right there. How do you not see it? It's like right there. Water is so clear. How do you not see it? It's like right there. Can't you see? Like right there? Hello? No, I can't. Why not? I'm still doing it. So, we'll just drop down and we'll just swim around this. We did go over the dive plan where we'll drop down and get to the railing of the deck of the ship. And so, because we had nitrox tanks, we were able to go in the water first. And after, I did a backward roll in, the other guy walked in and, had to readjust. And it's like, you okay to go down? And the guy's like, yeah, uh-huh. And that should have been another sign. Obviously, I was just excited. It's just so excited. And so, once got the okay to go down, okay, went down. And so I just did a free descent, just drop. And then I see the railing, and then the deck, and then the hull, and then the keel. Then I landed. I had a dive watch. I had my fins on, so tapping. Only got so much air in my tank. Now, mind you, I had my regulator in my mouth, of course, and my scuba mask. Nonetheless, just, what is taking you so long? And I saw him, climbing down, using the mooring line to climb downwards. And then, do the clearing ear thing, It's like, what is taking you so long? I mean, seriously. And okay, I get it. I was a little deep at that point. There were just a whole bunch of 9s on the depth gauge computer. Nonetheless, just Then I felt this kind of sensation where I was going backwards. And I turned and I look, and I just saw a white wall. It was just pure white-ish. I realized it was a fishy's mouth. You better shut your mouth. I mean, while using my regulator, you better shut your mouth and get back down to the bottom. I don't think so. And don't you follow me. Don't make me punch you in the face to defend myself. And, the width of that one tooth, really bright white wall. Well, I looked both ways. And all I saw was that one little TV. That was it, just one little TV. Did not see the gum line. Nope. Saw its little nose. It took a while for it to go back down, but saw its little nose. Little cute little nose. Perspective. Then I realized, well, apparently there are too many scuba divers in the water, so I can't tell which one is my scuba dive buddy. And so, I just swam around, took a few pictures, and then surfaced. And so at 99 ATMs, waited for about 5-10 minutes, per safety stop, which I could remember. And then, surfaced to 15 ATMs. So again, 99 times 33, and that's how many feet down for the first safety stop. And then the second safety stop at 15 ATM, so 15 times 33 feet, and that's how many. And then I was at the surface. And, hello, hi, right here. At that particular ship that was there, they sent someone out, reeled me in, and is the scuba dive police gonna be mad at me? I don't want to get in trouble with the scuba diving police. And the guy, there's no such thing. Yes, there are. There are scuba diving police. There's scuba diving police. No, there's not. Yes, there are. Apparently, they're called Noah. And police officers that scuba dive, and Navy SEALs, and recon guys, and and a few other, guys. I would guesstimate there are certain CIA operatives and FBI operatives who do scuba diving on top of, certain special forces for the Army and the Air Force and the Coast Guard and the Marine Corps and the Navy. Not just the ones that just go scuba diving for recreation. And so, just technically. And if there are any MPs or SPs that scuba dive, technically military police, scuba divers. And so I didn't say that then. Nonetheless, point now. And so, by technicalities. And so, and the Coast Guard is technically kind of like boat police of the shoreline, and some of them scuba dive. So there's that. Nonetheless, just saying. You'll point that out. Anyway, so I had explained what happened, and I was very concerned about my scuba dive buddy, and I was like, I couldn't find him, so on and so forth. They're like, well, he'll probably surface. Oh, well, I really hope I don't get in trouble with the scuba dive police, because then, I don't want to be in trouble for that. And they're like, so which ship are you from? The Starfish Enterprise. And so they went and called over to the Starfish Enterprise. I had shown them the pictures from my scuba dive there. They're like, so you really were at the bottom of the ocean. Yes, I was. Cannot tell a lie. Had a head injury on Palm Sunday in 2000. I cannot tell a lie. Oh my God. Yes, what? Do you understand that? Understand what? Oh my God, what? Oh. And so then, the guy from the Starfish Enterprise, I think it was actually the dive master who came out to that ship and then got onto the Starfish Enterprise and told them what happened. I'm like, has my scuba dive buddy come up? Like, I'm really, 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 really nervous. I don't want to get in trouble with the scuba dive police. And they're just like, there's no scuba dive police. Yes, there are. I know there are. I know it. If there's not, there's gonna be. But I think that there are scuba dive police. There's also police officers on land who scuba dive, but a whole other ball of wax, nonetheless. So, in that regard, my stomach started churning. And they were like, well, we got 3 boxes of juice. And they had orange juice, apple juice, and grape juice. And I was like, oh, the least acidic for my stomach, the way it's feeling, it's going to be the grape juice, because it realistically is. There's a lot of acidity in orange juice, which would make my stomach pain worse. Anybody who's had a stomach issue can very much give that testimony. Same thing with apple juice. And so grape juice, the least acidic in comparison. Well, that didn't help. I threw that up. I threw that up. So then the dive master said, well, why don't you go and snorkel? Maybe that'll help. Okay. Can try to find my scuba dive buddy. And I tried. And then divers started surfacing for the surface interval. My assigned scuba dive buddy was the last guy to get on the ship. I was infuriated because it was one of those wait, Because I had to do a whole bunch of stuff to make sure that I surfaced safely, not just the descent safely, but the surfacing safely. And those who understand, scuba tanks and the metal and that sort of stuff, the compression in that vicinity, plus the amount, and granted, I didn't use the whole tank, nonetheless, the air expansion within the scuba tank when surfacing from that depth level, I realize now, back then, it is what it is. So, in such, I waited for all the other scuba divers on the Starfish Enterprise to sit down, including my dive buddy. And where were you? And oh my God, what? Where were you? And I went and he told me he had joined a tour guide group. Why? Because I didn't want to miss a scuba dive. Oh, so you put them at risk? You put the dive master at risk for the tour guide? You put this guy at risk? You put that, and you the whole ship just because you did it, and went through this whole, oh my God, stop yelling at, I will stop yelling at you when I'm done yelling at you. And just A, B, C, D, E, F, G, just went down the whole thing. And just, I don't want to be yelled at you by any man. I don't care. I don't know who you think you're talking to, but I don't care. And so, that particular diver stayed at the front of the ship the whole time until the surface interval was over. And I had asked the dive master, I'm like, may I have a different scuba dive buddy? And the guy goes, so I have no doubt that there is not a scuba diver anywhere who would not want you as their scuba dive buddy. At all. Okay, what's the problem then? And the guy goes, it's getting him a scuba dive buddy. What do you mean? And the guy had to explain. He goes, well, if you get a different dive buddy, then, he has to have somebody that would be willing to dive with him. Everybody on the ship, nope. Would dive with you any day. Not him. No. Nope. Nope. Look at the sky. All right, well, you and I, we're going to talk before we drop down. And so then, when it came down to it, it was like, all right, so if you are more than an arm distance away from me, I'm going to hurt you. I move fast. So I'm just going to, And so, he stayed within an arm's distance, and then he signaled to me, low, almost out of air, got to surface. And I look at my air gauge, and I'm like, ugh, barely a dent in my tank. Ugh. Fine, at 60 ATMs, 60 times 33. Fine, we'll surface. Rude. So, is what it is. Circled the entire perimeter of the ship at 60 ATMs. Nonetheless, got to the 15 ATM surface interval for about 5-10 minutes, and then to the actual surface. And, by that time, there were quite a few divers already on board. So then, after the rest of the trip, went back to the state of Texas, spoke with the divers at International Scuba, and then did my cavern scuba diving, and then forgot my regulator for the cavern scuba diving trip. And at Cavern, by that point, I had figured that the other scuba divers at the International Scuba had been told about it, whether from me speaking with them or other divers speaking amongst themselves. The thing was, my cavern instructor was at the other location, because there were 2 locations at that time. So I don't know if he was ever told about that. Now, in 2020, that was back in 2009. Judging by the way his response was back then, I'm going to guesstimate he was not told at that point in time before the cavern trip out to Peacock Springs. We flew into Orlando, and I forgot my regulator. We went to cavern excursions, and the owner of the shop comes out and he goes, "Who is the dumbass that forgot their regulator?" That would be me. Hi. I'm that dumbass. And well, how did you get into scuba diving? And so I explained the whole thing. Well, what's your scuba diving experience that you think you can go cavern diving after forgetting your regulator? Well, and then I went through it, and then he goes, "Well, what have you done in the ocean?" "Oh, well, went here, here, here." "Oh, well, how's the Vandenberg?" "Well, let me tell you, I didn't get to go inside the Vandenberg because, what? Yeah, I planned to go into the Vandenberg, and that dive master was like, "Go in, maybe." It just, at that point, that guy just sat down. He's like, "Oh my God, what did you just say?" "Yeah, when you can go in the Vandenberg because..." And the guy's just, what? So the other scuba divers that were a part of my cavern trip, because they were getting certified in cavern diving as well, they just kind of, I looked over to them and they all just kind of gathered together and they're like, "Did she just say that she landed at the bottom of the ocean next to the Vandenberg?" And so the cavern excursions guy, he's like, "So I did this, and I did this, and me and my scuba dive buddy, we did this." I'm like, "Oh, okay, you did some cartography all by yourself." And he's like, "Yeah." And then we put the tanks here, and I put the tanks here, and then we drew it out here, and then we did this and this and this. I'm like, "Oh, well, that is very good of you. Look at that." I had no idea at that point, obviously. And so went on, and we talked for a while, and then he's like, "Well, I better, let you guys go." And then he looks over at my scuba instructor, Rich, and he goes, "I'll be making some phone calls." And Rich just went, and so, went back to the cabin at Peacock Springs, wherever the cabin was, and all of the divers in the car with me. Rich was driving, and I know her name is not Carmen, but that's all I can remember her as. Carmen was in the front passenger seat. "So what do you want to listen to? You like music? Of course. Doesn't anybody have whatever you want to listen to? What music are you into?" "Oh, I like country." "You like country music?" Yeah, I do. "You guys are from the state of Texas. You don't like..." No, it's country music school. We'll listen to country music." "Cool. Good. Back of the car." Just gonna have myself a fun old time. And had no idea that I moved the cars at the time. So, I realized that much later. And so, and then we talked a bunch, and then we did the on-land training aspect, and then in the water at Peacock Springs 1 before getting out of the water, and then going back in to actually do a few other things, and then practicing lines and stuff like that. And then the next day went to Peacock Springs 2, and spoke with all the scuba divers during the trip and stuff, then returned the regulator, and the guy was just like, yay! And there were a whole bunch of individuals that were at that particular scuba dive shop that, you know, I mean, it was busy when we went there, but then there were like a whole bunch of people there, and it's like, hey, it's like, what's going on? Oh, okay. Well, you know. Thank you very much for the regulator. Sure. Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. Yeah. Uh-huh. Okay, cool. And so then, you know, on the way back to Texas from Florida, I was told that I needed to work on my buoyancy a little bit in the pool before getting my cavern certification. And so I did after, well, when Rich had the time to, and then also did a couple other dives. But after that is when I started feeling certain physical after effects. And it was one of those, I need to focus not just on my son and my daughter, especially with what was going on in regards to my daughter at the time, but I could feel in certain regards certain things in reference to that particular set of dives. And it was one of those, okay, to prevent issues, take a step back. And the polar bear scuba dive, that was the final one where it was like, okay, I can't right now, not just because of what was going on with my daughter, but also because of what I was feeling myself. And I don't mean like emotional feelings, I mean the physical aspects. And so that particular point will be brought up in another official YouTube channel video. Thanks for tuning in. Comment, like, share, and subscribe to my official YouTube channel. However, yeah, the aspects of taking a step back were not just because of what was going on with my daughter and making sure my son was okay. It was the different physical things that I was starting to feel, and I didn't want to cause the other divers that were out at Clear Springs or any of the other locations, because also went to the Huntsville Quarry and Lake Travis, as well as Ocarina Hot Springs. So wanted to make sure that I took a step back to prevent not just the damage aspects, but also not put the other divers at risk, and even the environment in certain regards because of what I was feeling. And so that is going to be the end of this particular video broadcast. You guys have a good one.